Unveiling the cursed secrets of an ER nurse. 12 sinister encounters that still haunt me. Sarah felt the heavy mist of dread coat her skin as she navigated the hospital's fluorescent-lit corridors. Shadows loomed over her, twitching and slithering out of sight. Just last week, she walked out of the break room to find a patient babbling about the Midnight Healer, a sinister figure rumored to haunt the night. The stories had the power to make her blood run cold, and tonight, they danced like phantoms in her mind, intertwining fear with her already scrambled thoughts. Could myth be hiding behind the masks of her co-workers? Each night was a surge of chaos. Alarms blaring, and the acrid smell of antiseptic filled her nostrils. She manned the ER like a general leading soldiers into combat, but there was no glory, only the gnawing sensation of losing control. Committed to her patients, she often sacrificed moments with her children, leaving them tucked away in their beds. Every time the clock ticked past 3 a.m., a chill crept into her bones, whispering that she was slipping away from them. And then it came the night, when the roar of the storm matched the race of her heartbeat. Nurse Sarah fought through a wave of medical disasters, overdoses, accidents, but one patient, a man with gruesome wounds splattered across his chest, stopped her cold. They weren't just cuts. They looked almost ritualistic. He shook violently, his wide eyes filled with terror, as he muttered about the Midnight Healer. She should have dismissed him, but a strange heaviness settled in her gut. Before we continue, a voice echoed in her mind like a clap of thunder, a sudden urgency. I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But returning to work felt like stepping into a nightmare. Whispers surrounded the man's departure, patients started disappearing, and new traumas washed in like a high-tide bruises that bloomed as if from nowhere. Each hour only thickened the air with heavy suspicions. No one felt quite right anymore. Could she trust Tom, her ally with the perfect home life? Something about his perfumed friendliness felt off, like he wore a mask veiling something dark. Then came the moment that shattered her fragile sanity. Lucy, her sweet daughter, vanished during a playdate. Panic coursed through her like ice. Friends and neighbors dismissed her distress, exchanging knowing glances that stabbed at her heart. The community was hiding something, and fear began wrapping around her again. Returning to the hospital, the familiar hallways loomed like a maze where terror played hide and seek. Sarah felt herself unraveling. With every shift, her professional armor corroded, revealing the raw, desperate mother who knew danger lurked amidst the familiar faces. A sense of betrayal slithered beneath each reassuring smile. Was the Midnight Healer real? Did they walk among them in disguise? Days turned to nights, and with every heartbeat, the truth slipped further from her grasp, the walls closing in. As she dug deeper, shadows swirled around her, the innocent facade cracked under her insistent probing. And then she received a terrifying message, an anonymous warning to stop before it was too late. Breathing hard, knees weak, she stood on the precipice of a violent chasm. Could she dare step back from the edge, allowing the darkness to claim her family? With every instinct screaming, she took a step forward. The darkness would not win without a fight. But who among them was truly safe? And as sirens wailed, terror surged stronger. The hunt had begun, but time was running out. The air in the ER thickened, pressing down on Sarah like an unwelcome weight. Her heart raced as she paced the halls, each step echoing her unease. The fluorescent lights buzzed ominously, flickering as if they too were aware of the tension that hung in the air. How could she do her job amid this nightmare? Each face of her patients now felt scrutinized, staring back at her with secrets embedded in their haunted eyes. With the clock inching toward midnight, an uneasy knot twisted in her stomach. Reports of patients whispering incoherently about a savior, and those who deserved to be punished buzzed through the hospital like a virus. One night, while trying to catch her breath in the break room, Sarah overheard a group of nurses discussing a recent arrival. A young girl a mere 10 years old, covered in marks that mirrored those of the man from earlier. When had it spiraled to this? Consumed with worry for Lucy, and the foul whispers clinging to her like a curse, she darted to the nurse's station. "We need to look out for each other. Patients are showing signs of something unnatural," she blurted, desperation lacing her words. Tom looked up, his brow knitted in concern, yet the warmth that typically radiated from him felt absent. "You're seeing things, Sarah. We're professionals. Maybe you need some rest." An icy hush fell over the room, replaced by the low drone of an overhead announcement. With a shiver, Sarah turned away. She couldn't shake the feeling that betrayal lurked in the corners. She glanced at every shadow, the faces of co-workers twisting into ghoulish masks in her mind. Her instincts flared as she descended into the basement to fetch supplies. The fluorescent lights flickered again, buzzing angrily above her head. She settled her fingers on the cold doorknob, hesitating before she turned it. Inside the supply room, she rummaged through the shelves and froze. There, tucked behind boxes of slings and gauze pads, was a small, ragged doll, its button eyes dull and lifeless. Heart racing, she realized it was Lucy S. "No," she murmured, her breath catching. A cold sweat ran down her back. Who had taken it? Why was it here? She stumbled back, dropping the doll as if it had burned her. The door creaked open, and she spun around to find Tom standing there, a thin smile stretched across his face. "Looking for something?" His voice was smooth, too smooth. For a moment, time froze. The calm in his demeanor sent waves of alarm crashing through her. "Where did you find that?" she demanded, taking a step forward, the doll lingering between them. He shrugged, but there was a glint in his eye that twisted her insides. "Just a lost item. Seems you're the one feeling a little lost tonight." "Listen to me," she shouted, every nerve on fire. "There is something wrong, Tom." I think before she could finish, a raucous alarm blared throughout the hospital. The lights cut out, plunging them into darkness, sparking panic in the halls. The emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Was this how the Midnight Healer operated? Dissolving the barriers and dragging them deeper into despair? Tom's expression morphed from concern to predatory in an instant. "You really shouldn't have pride, Sarah," he said, his voice a low whisper that dripped with malice. "Now you know too much." As faint screams echoed down the hallways, Sarah's mind raced. Was it too late to turn back? The shadows closed in, each heartbeat echoing like a warning. She had to uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for Lucy. The hunt had begun, and she didn't know who was the prey. Suddenly, Tom lunged forward, and Sarah barely dodged. The chase was on, but who was hunting who? In the chaos, the lights flickered and died, leaving a darkness so deep it swallowed her whole. Desperation clawed at her throat. Would she uncover the Midnight Healer's identity before it was too late, or had she already walked into the trap? Somewhere in the black void, a whisper echoed softly, "Run." The darkness swallowed her whole, suffocating and thick. Sarah stumbled through the hall, her heart a wild drum, the echo of her breath the only sound in the void. The flickering emergency lights offered a sporadic, ghostly glow, barely illuminating the path ahead. She could almost hear whispers in the dark, her nerves twisted, pulling tight like cords ready to snap. "Where are you, Tom?" she muttered, glancing back over her shoulder. Each movement felt clumsy, like wading through fog. Yet, she knew he was close. The predatory glint in his eyes was etched in her mind, a haunting reminder of how deep into the darkness he had dragged her. Every shadow loomed larger, every creak amplified, and Sarah's senses screamed at her to keep moving. She'd seen terror in her patient's eyes. She'd felt the shadows whispering secrets just beyond her grasp. But now, she was the one hunted, and the hunter's smell of dread lingered in the air. Rounding a corner, she spotted the flickering signs of the nurse's station ahead. Light. A chance. She sprinted toward it, her pulse coursing through her veins like a storm. As she reached the entry, the fluorescent lights flickered to life too bright, too loud. Her eyes darted, searching for familiar faces, but the station was void, deserted. "Anyone here?" she called, her voice trembling. No reply came. Just silence, eerie and chilling. And then she heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping behind her. The hollow sound echoed against the sterile walls. Whipping around, she felt the air freeze. The hallway that led back was draped in darkness again, but there was something moving in it. "Stop!" she shouted, backpedaling away from the encroaching shadow. The figure stepped into the light, eyes wide and wild. It was a patient, one she'd tended to before, lips curled in a maddening rictus. Bruises marred their skin, and jagged scars crossed their arms like twisted veins. "Help me! You have to!" the patient rasped, words tumbling from their mouth like fragments of broken glass. "Not now. Just stay back," Sarah barked. Panic surged in her chest, strangling any empathy that threatened to surface. Could this person be another victim of the Midnight Healer? Or were they a part of it? The tapping grew louder. She turned her head slightly, spotting Tom again, sliding from the shadows with an eerie calmness. "You really shouldn't be scared," he said, his voice smooth, like a predator coaxing its prey. He was just asking for help. A chill shot through her, as she realized he meant to use the patient's plea against her. "You want to save them? Or save yourself?" There was an edge of madness in his eyes, a flickering light that hinted at something far more sinister lurking beneath. Sarah took a step back, backing against the nurse's station. "Get away from them." "Why?" Tom chuckled, tilting his head slightly. "Because it would endanger your precious little life?" The weight of his words crashed down upon her. She glanced between the patient, who now shivered in fear, and Tom, who stood confidently, a chilling presence that felt alive. Fear coiled in her stomach as she struggled to weigh her options. "Sarah," the patient croaked, reaching a shaky hand toward her. "You have to stop him. The Midnight Healer. He is coming for you." She felt the panic rise like a tide. "You knew?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Trust me," the patient choked. "He wears the mask of kindness, reveals the darkness." Before Sarah could respond, Tom lunged for the patient, grabbing them and wrenching them out of the light. "Enough of this," he shouted, throwing them back into the shadows. Adrenaline surged. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but the stakes had shifted. Now there were two lives at play, hers and that of a victim. She took a breath, standing tall. "You'll never get away with this," she yelled into the enveloping dark. Tom's laughter echoed, low and sinister. "Oh, but my dear, the game has just begun." The alarm in her head blared louder. Time was slipping away. She had to act. The Midnight Healer was closing in, and she'd walked into a trap of her own. Making run. The shadowed patient's voice reached her from behind as she turned her back on Tom, launching herself down the corridor. With the darkness swirling behind her, Sarah knew one thing for sure. She had to confront the nightmare head-on before it consumed her completely. In the distance, she heard the echo of footsteps, many footsteps. A horde advancing. The end was near, but what awaited her? Would she uncover the truth about the Midnight Healer or join the ranks of the damned? Sarah pushed herself into a frantic sprint, heart pounding like a jackhammer. The footsteps grew louder, multiplying, echoing in a chaotic symphony of dread that clawed at her reason. She cast a desperate glance over her shoulder. From the dark came a mass of figures, distorted shapes lurching toward her, faces obscured by shadows. "No, no!" she gasped, forcing herself to focus straight ahead. The sterile white walls whipped past like a blur, her mind racing with possibilities. Where could she go? Was the stairwell nearby? The thought of being trapped sent her spiraling deeper into panic. She swerved left into another corridor, hoping to lose them, but the tapping sound remained like a bad dream she couldn't shake. It was no longer just Tom. It felt like the very walls were alive, calling out to her, encouraging the nightmare to unfold. Each turn she took led her further into the bowels of the hospital. The blaring emergency lights flickered overhead, making every shadow grow more menacing. But she had to keep moving. There was a haunting inevitability behind her that urged her to stay one step ahead. Another corner, another sliding door. She burst through into a dimly lit storage room, filled with a medley of medical supplies. She gasped, running her clammy palms over the shelves, searching for anything that could help. A defibrillator, a heavy object, anything to use against Tom, and the chilling whispers of the darkness. "Think, Sarah, think," she breathed, scanning the room. Just then, a muffled voice pierced the air, echoing through the door. "We're coming for you, Sarah." A wave of cold washed over her. "No!" she screamed, the word echoing back at her as if the darkness laughed. It caught the attention of bizarre, unblinking eyes beyond the door, but fear fueled her desperation. She had to remain quiet. Sarah shuffled deeper into the shadows, ducking behind a shelf stacked high with boxes. The air was thick and stifling, filtered only by the metallic scent of disinfectant. Breathing slowly, she listened. The footsteps stopped at the door. An ominous silence enveloped her. Footsteps began again, and a figure stepped into the light barely visible through the door's small window. Tom. He stood outside, a shadow of malevolence in the dim glow, scanning the room with that chilling smile etched across his face. "Give up, Sarah. You can't escape what is meant to be, you know that, don't you?" His voice dripped with sadistic amusement. The shadows whispered again, weaving through her mind, but she forced them out. "Focus." Her eyes fell on a sharp box cutter resting right on the top shelf. With a quick, albeit shaky hand, she reached for it. The blade gleamed, a silver line between hope and horror. "Pathetic hiding." Tom's voice echoed through her mind as he moved closer. "Do you really believe you can run from me? The darkness? You belong to it now." Panic flared. She had to make a choice. Run straight to him, or try to find another way. Someone, anyone, had to be aware of the chaos unfolding. Heart racing, she ducked out from her hiding spot, but didn't see Tom at the window anymore. The silence was haunting, and dread sank in. She moved cautiously, the harsh lights flickering above, casting erratic shadows. Then, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the corridor, and Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. She froze. Something else was in the hospital, something that lurked even deeper than Tom's terror. "Help me," came a familiar voice, barely a whisper, vibrating from every corner of the darkness. The patient. "Sarah!" The voice pulled at her, an anchor in the uncertainty. But the fear pinned her in place. What if it was a trap? What if the midnight healer was lying in wait, ready to ensnare her in despair? A slow realization crept over her. By choosing the patient's voice, she was inviting fate into her fragile grasp. "Come on," she whispered to herself, biting back the knot of fear. She had a chance, but the ticking clock of dread loomed heavily over her. With a deep breath, she ventured into the corridor, slowly moving toward where the voice beckoned. The flickering light stuttered above her, shadows stretching like vicious hands. But as she pressed forward, She heard a sound even more chilling than the whispers, a low, guttural growl emerging from beyond. What had she truly unleashed? And was she too late to turn back? The growl curled through the air, cold and guttural. It spoke of things not meant to be known, and Sarah's heart drummed an erratic beat in her chest. She froze again, adrenaline spiking as the echo of that sound reverberated through the grimy corridor. "Help me," the voice cried again, tinged with urgency. Had it started to unravel? Swallowing hard, Sarah pressed forward, each step a war between instincts. The light blinked, casting a sickly glow over her path, and the shadows danced menacingly. Sarah, hurry now, the voice sounded more frantic, desperate. It was soft, yet it clawed at her resolve, demanding action. But with the voice came the growl, growing louder, closer. Was it Tom? No, he wasn't that low. This was something primal, something filled with hunger. Help! It echoed again, a demand tainted with dread, igniting Sarah's fear and instinct. If she didn't rescue whoever was trapped in that darkness, who would? Wasn't she just running from her own horror? What if that demand masked another trap? A shiver crept down her spine. She glanced back, trying to pierce through the growing shadows, clutching the box cutter tightly. "What do I do?" she whispered, fear lacing her every word. The growl surged close now, vibrating through the walls, causing loose debris to dance around her feet. The emergency lights flickered frantically like they were trying to warn her, and panic clawed at her mind. She shouldn't be here, this place was a snare. "Sarah," the voice was pleading and near. She took another trembling step forward. A door loomed ahead, the frame protruding out of the wall like a gargoyle. It stood ajar, the darkness inside oozing like thick smoke, beckoning her. "Come in, I'm in here." As she approached, the growl gave way to shuffling. Was something literally slithering around just beyond the door? A bead of sweat trickled down her temple, and she hesitated. The shadows inside writhed, pushing at the edges of the light with relentless persistence. "Please, I need you." The voice cracked with uncontained desperation, turning Sarah's indecision into a guilty urge. With a shuddering inhale, she gripped the door and pulled it wide open. A wave of frigid air hit her face, and she stumbled back as the warmth of the hospital enveloped her. The flickering lights barely illuminated an empty room, strewn with overturned beds and scattered medical instruments. "Where are you?" she gasped, stepping inside on shaky legs. The air felt alive, charged with static tension. Suddenly, the door slammed behind her with a bone-rattling thud, cutting off her escape. Panic surged through her. "No! Let me out!" She pressed against the door, frantically twisting the knob, but it wouldn't budge. "Sarah," the voice echoed around her now, sounding closer yet further away, like a ghost trapped in the shadows. An unseen force seemed to pull her into the depths of the dark room. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Out of the corner, something scuttled. She swung around just in time to see a figure emerge, disheveled, pale, fingers clawing at the air. It was the patient, his eyes wide and wild, drenched in a sheen of sweat. "Help me," he rasped, staggering towards her, but his body shimmered as if on the brink, the line between reality and nightmare blurring right in front of her. Something's wrong. Before she could think, the growling exploded from behind her. She spun around, heart thundering as the shadows twisted and coalesced into a menacing figure. It loomed, monstrous and dreadful, its eyes piercing through the darkness, their glow seeping into her very soul. "Leave!" it bellowed, scraping claws against the floor, echoing despair and anger. "Alice! Help me!" The patient shrieked, yet he moved its way back into the shadows, fading just as fast. At that moment, Sarah felt it, the overwhelming dread of the curse that lingered in the air, a darkness that blotted out hope and despair equally. Could she defy it, or would she dissolve within its grasp? Not this time. She screamed, brandishing the box cutter as the figure surged closer, its breath like ice against her skin. Knowing it was now or never, she backed away, adrenaline sparking in her veins. What was she prepared to face? She weighed the decision heavily, torn between the lurking horror in front of her and the dying plea of the distressed patient fading into shadows. "Sarah!" came the voice again, pulling at her heart with renewed urgency. With the dark figure closing in like ink spilling from an open wound, she had to make a choice. Move towards the patient or face the growling terror behind her. But what if choosing one meant condemning the other? Decision time was running out. All she knew was that whatever happened next would unveil secrets bound to the hospital's very core, and possibly her own damn fate. The growl intensified, reverberating in Sarah's bones, a cacophony of rage and despair wrapped tightly in a menacing shroud. The walls felt like they were closing in, trapping her in a nightmare where reality was twisted beyond recognition. "Help!" The patient's voice pierced through the chaos, raw and visceral. It was like a rope thrown into the churning waters of her panic. She could almost taste the desperation, the thin veil of sanity fraying around them both. "Just a moment," she shouted back, as if that could create a lifeline, a chance for salvation amid the growing dread. But time was unraveling. The monstrous figure glided closer, shadowy limbs contorting as it surged forward, longing for flesh, longing for fear. "Sarah!" A voice clamored again, more insistent this time, dragging her focus from the growing horror before her. She felt herself being torn, caught between two worlds, the tangible terror of that growl and the haunting anguish of the patient. "Screw it," she thought, heart racing as she bolted toward the dwindling figure retreating into the shadows. With each step forward, a jolt of electric terror coursed through her, a recognition of the reality licking at her heels. "Where are you?" she yelled, scanning the abyss of darkness. Something shifted in the dim light, a pale hand reaching out from the edge, trembling and desperate. That hand clawed at something unseen, summoning her closer like a moth irresistibly drawn to a flame. "I'm right here. I can help you." The bravado in her voice felt like borrowed air, each word grinding against the friction of terror. The shadows writhed around her, and a sudden gust of icy air swept through the room, sending chills cascading across her skin. The growl behind her morphed into a low, despondent whisper, feeding off her fear. "Leave her alone," whispered an echo from the shadows, but it was impossible to tell if it belonged to her subconscious or something much darker. A cold sweat coated her palms as she shoved aside remnants of morbid realities. She pressed forward into the shadows, trying to focus on the glimmering hand, knowing it was the only tether amidst the storm of darkness. "Please!" the voice gasped, the plea laced with clawing terror. It clawed at her heart, wrapping around it like a tightening noose. With one final push, she reached the figure. Emaciated and filled with distress, it was the patient Alice. "I've been trapped here, it's inside me. We have to get out." Before she could respond, the growling laughter erupted behind her, resonating like a thunderclap. It was full of malice, a cacophony of derision swirling her, swallowing her reason whole. The door was sealed. There was no way out. "Run!" Alice cried, instinctively gripping Sarah's wrist, pulling her toward a shadowed corner of the room. "This way." The plea was urgent, full of a knowledge Sarah yearned to understand. Together, they stumbled toward the darkness. Suddenly, the room twisted in on itself, a misaligned axis of fear. The shadows took form, a mass of grotesque limbs and glimmering eyes, an embodiment of nightmares. "Stay away!" it shrieked, the voice guttural and distorted. Urgency flooded her as her pulse hammered in her ears. She turned, heart racing, her mind scrambling. Was this the end? Would she find out the truth behind the horrors, or would they both simply vanish into the void? "Stay close," she shouted at Alice, pulling her deeper into the shadowy sanctuary. They had to face it, whatever lay beyond. No turning back. The growl shifted, building to a crescendo, an ominous threat coiling around them as they ventured further into the depths of darkness. But just before the shadows could envelop them completely, a crack of blinding light shot through, illuminating a pathway that beckoned them forward. Was it salvation, or merely a new horror waiting to unfold? Just hold on, we're almost there. As they dashed toward the flickering light, the growl erupted in sheer fury, rattling both their resolve and their sanity. Don't look back. Would they find freedom, or would the darkness consume them whole? The pull of uncertainty grew stronger, gnawing at Sarah's very being as they raced to evade whatever horror awaited them at the end of their frantic escape. The answer lay just ahead in that blinding light, but at what cost? The light flashed around them, a spectrum of hues swirling like a kaleidoscope of hope and dread. Move! Move! Sarah urged, pulling Alice along as they bolted toward the beacon, trusting that brightness could guide them to safety. But the shadows writhed, suddenly darker, their tendrils reaching out, grasping for something to anchor themselves to. Alice's grip tightened around Sarah's wrist, fear flooding her eyes. What if it's a trick? She gasped, her breath shaky. No! It's our only chance, Sarah shouted, desperation lacing her voice. They stumbled closer as the light flickered ominously, illuminating grotesque figures lingering just beyond its reach. Then it hit her. The growl, now a beastly roar, filled the space with an electric terror that crackled through the air. It resonated through her bones, reverberating with ancient rage. She fought the urge to look back, but the sound clawed at her sanity, inviting her to succumb to the panic. Don't stop, she yelled, breaking into a sprint. The light pulsed ahead like a heartbeat, an almost living entity calling them closer. Somehow, it felt both right and wrong, as if it held secrets that should never be unlocked. They neared the threshold of illumination, but with each step, Alice's hesitation grew, her breath becoming ragged. We can't trust it, Sarah. Please. We have to keep going. But doubt swirled like storm clouds in Sarah's mind. What if the light wasn't salvation? What if it revealed something worse? Suddenly, the room shook violently, walls bending and warping as the horrific shadows lunged. Wicked laughter echoed, mingled with screeches and cries that scraped against Sarah's mind like nails on glass. Sarah! Alice's voice trembled, breaking through the cacophony of terror. A pair of obsidian eyes glared at them from the inside of the light, piercing and unsettling. Join me, it whispered, the words cloaked in a sickly sweet tone that promised knowledge yet held the heavy scent of decay. Run! Sarah screamed as she pushed Alice forward, traversing the threshold just as the shadows converged, blackening the space behind them. They plunged into the light. A disorienting rush enveloped them. It felt like diving into a frigid lake, shock slamming through them, as they fell into an alternate reality, wheezing breaths replaced by a suffocating stillness. As their senses adjusted, they found themselves in a long, sterile hallway lined with flickering fluorescent lights. It felt wrong, too clean against the backdrop of chaos they had just escaped. Where are we? Alice panted, glancing wildly around. The soft hum of machinery hummed unnaturally, promising safety yet echoing with an eerie sense of something deeply wrong lurking just beneath. I don't know, but we have to stay alert. Panic dripped from Sarah's voice, filling the space with tension. They were still prisoners of a darker force. The threat felt all-consuming. But then, they heard it. Soft whispers snaked through the air, ghostly, intimate, laced with the haunting echo of lost souls. They're coming for you. They sent you who? Alice gasped, taking a step back. Before Sarah could answer, the lights fluctuated, and the room began to tremble again. It was as if the walls themselves contorted with a life of their own, closing in, breathing. Run! But Alice froze, wide-eyed as the whispers grew louder, clawing at her mind. I can hear them. I can hear them. The lights overhead burst one by one, plunging the hallway into an almost suffocating darkness broken only by the remains of flickering emergency lights. Don't listen. We have to move, Sarah shouted, searchlight focused on Alice's terrified face. As she grasped her arm, a deafening scream cut through the air. A twisted figure slithered from the engulfing shadow, a familiar face marred in horror, a reflection of what they had narrowly escaped. Alice? Sarah's voice wavered, uncertainty gnawing at her gut. Is that you? But before Alice could respond, her eyes glazed over, entranced by the figure looming closely. Welcome back, it crooned, voice dripping with malice. In that moment, Sarah knew they were far from safe, far from free. Something awaited them, a truth buried amidst shadows they had barely begun to unravel. Holding her breath, she realized the hunt was over. Two choices now, the voice taunted, echoing through the darkness. Face the truth, or become part of the shadows. The whisper clawed through her, pressing down like a stone. Which would they choose? The answer loomed just beyond the blood-chilling silence. A piercing silence engulfed them, threatening to swallow Sarah whole as she stared at Alice's frozen form. The twisted figure, a grotesque echo of their past, lingered just behind Alice, its presence suffocating. The lights above flickered weakly, flickering like dying stars, unable to pierce the gloom. Step away from her, Sarah shouted, her voice trembling yet sharp, cutting through the thick atmosphere. The reflection regarded her, its mouth curling into a smile that felt like knives scraping against her skin. Alice is home now, it whispered, glancing at her friend with eyes that were not her own. She belongs with us, with me. Alice blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream, but there was something eerie about her gaze and emptiness that sent chills racing down Sarah's spine. Alice, please, don't listen to it. But the whispers twisted around them, a cacophony of voices rising and falling in a haunting rhythm. Join us, forget your fears, embrace the darkness, Alice. You have to fight it. Panic surged through Sarah, her heart racing as she stepped closer, desperation clawing at her throat. Remember who you are? It's beautiful here. There's no pain. Alice's voice, once filled with anguish, now dripped with a strange longing. Her body swayed slightly, caught in a trance while shadows shifted like rippling water at the edges of her vision. Suddenly, the ground trembled once more, shuddering violently as if the building itself was alive and reacting to their fear. Sarah staggered, her breath hitching as the shadowed figure leaned closer to Alice, reaching out with long fingers that twisted unnaturally. Make your choice, it crooned. In the light, you suffer the weight of your memories. In the dark, you find peace. Sarah locked eyes with Alice, searching for a flicker of recognition, something solid to cling to. You're stronger than this. You've fought through worse. Then, with a feral scream, the creature lunged forward, claws outstretched. Time slowed as Sarah grabbed Alice, yanking her back just as the figure brushed against her sleeve. A jolt of ice coursed through her, igniting every nerve in her body like lightning. Run! Come on! She dragged Alice back, sprinting into the darkened hallway, the whispers slithering after them, growing louder with each frantic heartbeat. They raced through the flickering lights, the air thickening with sinister intent. They reached a door at the end of the hall, a steel structure that appeared bolted shut. Desperation surged as Sarah tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. Alice, she cried, eyes wild. We have to get out. But Alice merely stared at the door, her expression blank, caught in the shimmering illusion of the creature's call, as if it were a siren beckoning her home. Alice, please! The whispers intensified, filling the corridor with a deafening crescendo. Every beat of Sarah's heart screamed at her to escape, but without Alice, she was nothing. The creature's voice echoed once more, warm and inviting. What if you could leave the pain behind? What if you could return to your true self? Alice. Sarah yelled again, shaking her friend's shoulders, but it was like shaking a marionette whose strings had been cut. If Alice could hear it, if she could even feel the terror swallowing her name, would she choose the shadows? Before she could process the fear clawing at her insides, the wall behind them began to bleed shadows, twisting like smoke come alive. Join us, dear girls, only one must decide. The words wrapped around Sarah's throat, squeezing tighter. A decision had to be made. Suddenly, the door burst open behind them, flooding the corridor with blinding white light that seemed to annihilate the shadows. Sarah blinked, hope igniting, but it was short-lived. Choose now, Sarah. The figure hissed, fingers curling as it started to glide closer, the shadows writhing at its feet. Gathering strength, racing breaths filled the cramped space as Sarah's world narrowed to a single question. Would she save Alice or embrace her own darkness to escape? The answer loomed near, as they both trembled in the face of a choice that could seal their fates. And just as the shadows lunged, the light expanded, swallowing all. What truth lay hidden, cloaked in the brilliance beyond? The world erupted into chaos. A blinding light engulfed them, cutting through the darkness like a sword. But the overwhelming brilliance did not promise safety. Instead, it felt like the eye of a storm, bright and deceptive. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, her heart pounding as she felt the warmth of the light wash over her. The whispers faded momentarily, replaced by the rush of air that filled her lungs. But in that fragility, a new horror unfurled. Alice. She spun around, pressing her palms against her friend's shoulders. We have to move. And then, with a horrifying crackle, the shadow figure flickered at the edge of the light, a malice too potent to be erased. It lingered, waiting, a predator cloaked in silk. Alice stared blankly, lost in the embrace of a memory or a call to darkness that Sarah could not reach. Alice. Sarah cried again, shaking her harder, panic piercing through her. You have to fight it. But Alice's eyes glassed over, reflecting the light yet holding no recognition. I don't want the pain, she murmured softly, the words like poison to Sarah's ears. A guttural growl rumbled from the figure behind them, its smile now twisted into a grotesque sneer. Pain is a choice, child. Surrender, and you will never feel it again. The walls began to pulse with darkness, waves of shadow creeping toward them, eager to reclaim what was promised. With every heartbeat, the light flickered. Sarah could feel her grip on hope slipping. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the light. There is no time. A voice cried, raw and urgent. It belonged to a figure, half drowned in illumination, the outline barely solid. A surge of relief whispered through her, accompanied by an electrifying jolt of realization. If they stayed, they were doomed. Grab her. The figure shouted, anger flaring as it lunged forward into the thick darkness. With a desperate lunge, Sarah seized Alice's wrist and pulled. Hold on. The figure plunged deeper into the light, arms outstretched. It felt like a lifeline, but as Sarah rushed forward, the shadows coiled like serpents, snapping, gnashing, and pulling on her legs. Alice's body, light as a feather moments ago, now felt anchored to despair. Choose. The creature's voice echoed, sharper now, slicing through the panic. Only one escapes. Run! Sarah screamed, adrenaline fueling her as she deepened her grip on Alice. Her heart thundered, desperate for an answer against the rising panic, against the tightening shadows. The figure in the light looked back at them, eyes aflame with urgency. Alice, listen to her. You can fight. Flickers of recognition broke through Alice's eyes, a spark fighting against the void. Sarah? The hesitation sent a shiver through Sarah, but the shadows pulsed, feeding on uncertainty. Yes, it's me, Sarah shouted, feeling the pulse of both terror and hope. "Take my hand," the light-shrouded figure urged, tension weaving through every word. But as they teetered on the edge of potential salvation, Alice's gaze shifted, haunted yet drawn. What if it's so beautiful?" "No!" Sarah cried, clutching Alice tighter, but the shadows hissed louder now, vibrating with promises of peace, locking around them like a vice. Then, just as Alice began to lean closer to the darkness, a violent jolt shook the ground, tearing through the air, splintering the world before them. The light flickered once more, brighter now, but Sarah's grip felt fragile, teetering on the precipice of despair. "Make your choice," the figure insisted one last time, but this time, with a crushing certainty. The ground quaked, shadows rising in a furious tempest. Sarah's mind raced. Would she abandon Alice to save herself? The terrifying truth hit her. Sacrificing Alice meant losing everything. "I want to leave you," she yelled, feeling the tension snap. But what if Alice's answer lay in surrender? The creature's whispers teased hungrily at the edges of appreciation for the shadows. As the light flickered violently, shadows surged forward, wrapping around Sarah, threatening to pull her back into the abyss. Their choice hung in the balance, the terrible weight of fate pressing down. A pulse of light radiated, trembling in the blackness. The next moment felt suspended in time. Would they escape together? Or would the dark tide claim them both? Whatever came next felt imminent, as horrifying and beautiful as the light flexed one last time on the precipice of chaos. What would become of Alice? And what would Sarah do when faced with unbearable darkness? The world fractured. Light and dark crashed, a clash of titans. Sarah's grip on Alice slipped, but she held on, with a tenacity born out of desperation. The shadows writhed, eager to swallow them both, their whispers clawing at her sanity. "Don't let go," Sarah screamed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The shadows screeched, lunging closer, eager to turn hope into despair. "Alice, fight it!" Desperation laced her words, twisting in the air around them. She could see Alice teetering on the edge, caught between two realms. The remnants of her friend flickered behind glazed eyes, fighting against the pull of the dark figure. "Sarah, it's so easy," Alice's voice trembled, fragile like glass. But the flicker of recognition ignited a flame in Sarah's chest. "No! You're stronger than this. Remember the laughter, remember us," Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking under the weight of their shared memories, vivid and powerful. The shadows recoiled, furious at the influx of light seeping into their territory. The figure laughed, its voice a haunting melody twisted with malice. "You think memories will save you? They are chains, binding you to the past." "No! They're what make us who we are," Sarah shouted, every fiber of her being screaming against the pull of despair. "Hold on to me, Alice. I want to let you go." At that moment, Alice's eyes widened, a spark igniting deep within. The amber glow fought against the shadows, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I remember," she gasped, her voice growing stronger, filled with purpose. A newfound determination flickered behind her gaze. "That's it. You can fight it," Sarah urged. Together, they stepped toward the light, Alice pulling away from the glimmer of darkness that tempted her, the growls of the shadow figure roaring in rage. "What are you doing? You belong with us!" The figure shrieked, no longer smooth but ragged, losing control of its grip. "No!" Alice cried out, her resolve blooming into defiance. "I choose life. I choose Sarah." With that, the shadows recoiled, screeching and writhing as if burnt by a force they didn't understand. "Fools! You can't escape!" The growls morphed into frenzied screams, a cacophony of rage reverberating through the walls. "Now! Run!" Sarah shouted, urging Alice forward as the shadows thrashed violently, attempting to reclaim their prize. Together, they sprinted toward the blinding light. A surge of warmth flooded through them, an embrace that felt like home as they pushed forward, each step banishing doubt and fear. The shadows clawed at their heels, furious tendrils reaching out in desperation, but the light swallowed them whole. Within that brilliant burst, everything shifted, time bending, reality shattering until they found themselves breathing heavily, standing outside in the cool night. The stars twinkled overhead, serene as if the storm never existed. Gasping, they collapsed on the grass, heartbeats echoing in the stillness. "We did it," Sarah breathed, disbelief washing over her as she looked at Alice, eyes wide and alive. Alice nodded slowly, her brow furrowing. "But what about the others? The patients, who? They'll be okay. We broke the hold. Together." It was a promise, a fragile vow laced with hope. "We have each other now." A flicker of something dark glided among the shadows behind them, an ominous reminder that the darkness would always exist, waiting to strike again. But for now, they were free to laugh, free to live. "I'm so glad you came back," Sarah whispered, wrapping her arms around Alice tightly. "I'm glad you didn't give up on me," Alice replied, her voice trembling yet resolute. "We'll always fight together." Before them stretched a road toward the dawn, each step forward bathed in the colors of a new beginning. They wouldn't forget the horror, but as long as they had each other, they wouldn't let it claim them. Time passed. Lives continued, those within the hospital truly waking. They became the voices that spoke of courage, the echoes of joy fighting against the ominous. And as they watched the sunrise crest the horizon, a sense of peace began to settle in. But behind them, in the dimly lit corridors of the hospital, the midnight healer watched, waiting ready for the next soul to claim. The flicker of warning echoed in Sarah's heart. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As they stepped into the light of a new day, they vowed to share their story. The fight against the darkness would never end, but they understood that even the tiniest glimmer of hope could cut through the shadows. And that was enough. Right now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe immediately, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and support our mission. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what you just witnessed. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this thrilling conclusion. Join our journey. You make all the difference.